What's going on, everybody? Brandon Rust here. Another YouTube live. Today, I wanted to talk about white ash. And I wanted to talk about whether or not you guys thought it was a determination of quality. And I wanted to kind of go over a little bit of a white paper that's actually from 1923. So a lot of the questions about white ash and the science behind it have been answered over 100 years ago. So I was going to kind of review that a little bit and give you guys a little bit of insight onto what I know. But first, cheers. Let's smoke and then get this live rolling. Remember, Microbe Plus, 30% off right now. You can go to the Bokashi Earthworks website and get that multifunctional soil probiotic. Oh crap, where is my lighter? I'll be right back. I'm going to go get a lighter and then we'll start. All right, here we go. Welcome, everybody. I hope everybody's having a great Tuesday morning. I already got to wake and bake this morning, but if you're just getting up, grab yourself a bong, grab yourself a joint. All right, so white ash. Excuse me. Woo! So TC Hippie says it's all due to water activity. No? Question mark? So water activity has a lot to do with it. But when we're talking about white ash, we have to talk about nutrients, and we have to talk about carbon. So this paper right here, it's called The Absorption of Carbon by the Roots of Plants. It's actually a white paper from 1923. And what this paper is talking about is the balancing act that the plant plays between nutrient ions and CO3, which is a negatively charged CO2 compound. And what happens, according to this paper, I can just read some of this. It says, without exception found that the presence of nitrates in the solution is followed by the presence of carbonate in the ash. And I'm going to get into that in a second, why that is. But I've gone through just like so many of these white papers that I've had, and I've highlighted kind of the pertinent parts. So a point that was noticed was that the absorption of an element of plant food is greatly influenced by the presence of a different element of plant food in the nutrient solution. For example, the absorption of potassium from a solution of potassium chloride may be doubled by the addition of sodium nitrate in the solution. So it has to do also with the amount of stored nutrients that are being stored in the plant biomass. And also, this paper shows that the plant is actually both absorbing and exuding CO2 to balance out the nutrients. Silica also does this, and the way that I like to think about this is if you took a battery, let's visualize the plant as a battery. Now, a battery can only hold so much charge, and just like a plant, it can only hold so much charge. Well, where is this charge coming from? This charge actually comes from the positively charged cations. So calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium, ammonium, iron, zinc, copper, and manganese. Those are the majority of the plant nutrient ions are actually positively charged. Phosphate, sulfate, nitrate, molybdenum, boron, and silica all have negative charges. Phosphate, and sulfate are used in far less quantities than things like calcium, potassium. And so what has to happen is the plant, when you're taking up all of those base cations or those positively charged cations, right? It's adding a positive charge. And so it's like that battery. You can only add so much charge before something has to be released as an exudate. So the plant will release CO2, potassium, and sodium to mitigate that. But what happens is if you are over fertilizing, let's say you're over fertilizing nitrogen, you can actually see the direct impact that has on the plant if you're over fertilizing. You know, the leaves get really dark, they start to crinkle. But what also happens is those nutrient ions get complexed as organic molecules, right? Or carbon compounds. And what happens is when you have biomass that has a bunch of complexed metal alloyed ions complexed to carbon, to release and liberate the carbon bond from that metal alloyed ion, it takes really high temperatures. So water hydrology has a huge part to play in it, because if your water activity or the is really low, or your flower is really dried out, it will burn hotter. So even if there is a lot of excess nutrients that are complex or in that material, they will be liberated easier because that material is drier and it's being burned hotter. One of the things that immediately comes to mind is if I ever do a dab, right? And I don't clean everything afterwards, or if I burn it a little bit too hot, you'll get that charring on your glass, on your banger. And you can clean it or whatever, but if the material has excess whatever in it, you'll see it as residue. And then what you would do, even if you take in like something like alcohol and you're swiping that off, it doesn't come off. But if you take a torch and you start heating that up, you'll start to see all of that carbon dissipate and it cleans it off. It's that same kind of concept, that the hotter the material is, the more volatilization of those carbon compounds. Now, you could have really, really great weed that just has a higher water activity level, but it'll burn darker because it's not volatilizing certain carbon compounds. I think that this is also ties in to the idea of flushing. If you're in a situation where you've constantly, let's say in hydroponics, where all of your nutrient ions are being delivered in solution, the plant really doesn't have a choice. It's going to take that up with water. So if the plant is absorbing water, it's going to take that up, even if it's not in a balanced solution. So if you're getting excess nutrients that are stored up, it will affect the way that it burns. But when it comes down to it, straight up though, it's really about the temperature that that material is being burned at. So to me, you can't determine quality by ash. Again, you could take great weed that might have a little higher water activity, tastes fucking great, gets you high, but the ash is just slightly darker. Still great weed. It's just that the material itself is fresher and it's not as dry. Another thing is if you were to let's take an example. I smoke bong hits. If I were to just take a nug like I normally do, I don't typically take a grinder and grind up my bong hits. I usually just kind of, pinch them apart and I stuff them in my bong hit. The fineness or the how fine the material is ground will also affect the temperature at which it burns. So if I was to take this same weed and grind it up really finely and put it into a joint versus just taking a full nug and packing it into a bong, the ash color is going to be different because it's burning at a different temperature. So really what it really comes down to when we're talking about white ash and why some ash is black, some ash is white, it really comes down to the particulate size of the material because that's going to affect the temperature at which it burns, and then also the water activity. So that's my opinion. There are certain situations where, let's say you get some fucking commercial weed or whatever, some fucking some just pump where they're just pumping a fucking 5.5 EC all the way through to try to fucking get big yields. And even if that flower is dried properly and cured, it still may burn a little darker, the ash. And that's again because if you have an excess of stored nutrients, nitrates, potassium, magnesium, things like that, it will not burn at a higher temperature. It'll burn at a lower temperature. So those are just things to think about, So those are just some things to think about. The grind and roll. Yeah, man. I'm telling you, the temperature at which it's burned and the particulate size. Those are the two biggest determining factors. But again, like if you're pumping your plants the whole time and then you're like, all right, this last week I'm going to flush, make sure I get all this excess stuff out of my media and then hope that the plant is utilizing what's in excess inside of its tissue. And that's not always going to be the case because when the plant gets further into being mature, it's actually absorbing less. It's utilizing less of those compounds. So if you're forcing it and it's getting stored in there just by not feeding it or flushing for a week, the plant isn't necessarily going to utilize all of those stored nutrients, right? And so really what you want to do is make sure that you're feeding adequate, balanced nutrition and not overfeeding. Have you ever smoked weed using a magnifying glass? Yes, I have. Yeah, different papers burn cleaner too. If you're using like really thin papers that haven't been treated with a bunch of chemicals, anytime you add things into that paper, it's going to change the way it burns. What if flush is done slowly over a month? Well, here's the thing, like I am not a fan of flushing. I understand the concept of getting excess precipitants out of your media, like if you were doing rock wool or cocoa, where you're using a nutrient salt base, because you get precipitation reactions that cause osmotic stress. So kind of flushing those out, because it's excess and it can cause, issues. I understand that. But flushing because you've overfed continuously for so long is, I don't think that's the proper approach. I think proper balanced nutrition and, like for what I do, I don't run super high. My soil solution ppm in my living soil isn't like super high. It's probably around 700 to 800 ppm total, which is considerably low comparative to a lot of nutrient solutions. And I think that the real difference is because in my soil system, they're more balanced. It's not just a pre-blended thing. It's like I can manipulate the levels and the target levels of each individual nutrient because I'm using soil data and saturated paste testing. And also another thing, it's really excess nitrates will really affect a lot of different things. It won't just affect the way that it burns and the temperature that it burns, but it'll also affect the metabolism of the plant when it comes to the production of cannabinoids and terpenes. So overdoing things like nitrates and nitrogen will decrease your cannabinoid percentages, and it'll also decrease your terpene percentages, and that can change the effect and the flavor. Yeah, and the thing is, like, the plant is using so much less nutrients. The time that the plant uses and needs the most amount of nutrients is when that plant is bolting. So when you change the timing, when you switch your photo period from veg to flowering, that is the time when those things start utilizing, because they're putting on the most biomass in those first 2 to 3 weeks of flower. What you want to make sure that you have enough balanced nutrients at that point. And the way that the plant works is as it's building its biomass and it's budding, it kind of the nutrient dynamics change a little bit. But when you get further into the maturity of that plant, it's using less, pretty much almost everything. But flushing is really misunderstood, because the only time that I would ever flush is when I'm trying to remove something. And that's always been the idea, right? Even when I used to flush, when I used to grow in hydro, I would flush in between my nutrient. When I would refresh my nutrient batches, I would run just one quick little clean water so I could get all of that excess precipitants and any of that excess stuff out before I changed out my nutrient solution. And our target was like, we wouldn't run super high ECs. When I was doing ebb and flow in hydroton with rock wool, we would start off our clones in maybe about 200 to 300 ppm, using the 3-part general and like an organic additive like Floralicious, an amino, or like an amino acid supplement or something like that. Then when they were a little big, as they were getting a little bit bigger, we bump them up to 400, 500, 600. When we transplanted them in the flower, they'd be about 800 ppm. And once they were, done bolting, we were running about, 12 to 1300 ppm max, usually all the way through that. And I see those numbers are so higher nowadays. And we never had a problem with quality. We didn't have a problem with yield. We were hitting our numbers, and we only fed water the last 3 or 4 days. We weren't like, oh, I need to start flushing because my plants, like, we would see the natural senescence. The nutrients weren't, so we weren't feeding so heavy that we had to like flush and try to get the plant to pull and utilize all the rest of the stuff that was stored in its material. But I think that flushing is greatly misunderstood. But, you know, it's okay because that's why I do these lives and I try to inform people because there's a lot of people that could be new. You know, there's a lot of people that have been doing it as long as I have in this chat. And the whole reason I do these is so you guys can get together. You guys can talk back and forth on these chats. I can answer questions. So, yeah, I had really big plants last year too. I dug out. I know I did a live yesterday. I was talking a little bit about the trichoderma because somebody had asked about the, you know, if trichoderma would outcompete mycorrhizal. So I went through my little white papers down here, and there's a paper called "The Contribution of Saprophytic Fungi." Uh, Tremates, Viscolor, and Trichoderma harzianum, and the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungus Glomus deserticola to arsenic tolerance in eucalyptus plants. So I read through this, and this talks a little bit about the different types of associations and relationships between Trichoderma and other soil biota. There's another paper called "The Interactions Between Trichoderma Strains and the Arbuscular Mycorrhizal Fungi Glomus mossae and Gigaspora rosae." And it is another white science white paper that talks about trichoderma and mycorrhizal fungi associations. Those can both be found and downloaded right on the internet. This is the one that I mentioned yesterday, right here. This is called Trichoderma species, opportunistic avirulent plant symbionts. This one is really, really awesome. And if I remember correctly, this is the paper that actually talks about T22 trichoderma and other different strains of trichoderma that make mycorrhizal associations with the plant roots. And then this one right here is hands down the best science white paper that I have found on trichoderma. And it's called Trichoderma in the Rhizosphere, an approach towards a long and successful symbiosis with plants. I think this one is about, I don't know, 50 some, it's about 40 pages long. But there's so much useful, beneficial information that is in this that can be used and applied. It's, you know, these science research papers are what basically helped me to develop the biocrop steering protocols and the usage of the trichoderma and the bacillus subtilis. So, oh yeah, and there's another one too. This one is called Trichoderma as a Model to Study Effector-like Molecules. This paper actually talks about some of the protein effectors, some of the peptides, and some of the secondary metabolites, like terpenes, polyketides, phytohormones, volatile organic compounds that actually influence the upregulation and the genomic response to that plants have with when you add these microorganisms. So if you really want to deep dive, reach out. All of these are on my Dropbox, and I can send you a link, and then you can find those in there. You just email me or DM me on IG. Peace of mind, no problem. Oh, I was wondering if they ever ever completed Trichoderma bacillus against hop latent viroid? That's a really good question. And this is my idea on it. So I don't have any, at this moment, I don't have any science on the particular subject, like, hop latent viroid on cannabis and whether Trichoderma and bacillus can affect it. But I do know, and I have read other science that talks about different types of bacteria and fungi that will suppress viroids. And the reason why they do this is because a virus is essentially a gene packet. And it doesn't typically contain, a virus doesn't typically contain a cell wall. And it doesn't produce its own cells. What it does is it latches into a reception site on a gene transcription site, and then it copies and replicates itself. Now, if you were in a situation where a virus lived in a soil, I would hypothesize that because it is a carbon-based compound, it's a gene packet, so it's going to be, amino amide groups. It's going to be, nitrogen, carbon, hydrogen, and phosphorus. Those are essentially the four of the oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Those are the 5 elements that make up genes. And since this thing is a gene packet, I would assume, or I would hypothesize, that because bacteria and fungi utilize those elements and have the ability to, use enzymes to rip apart carbon compounds for their nutrients, that there are, I don't know which microorganisms they are. I don't know if Trichoderma and Bacillus subtilis, but I would assume that can happen. There is one thing that we could do, because I work with the lab in Stillwater. They're super, super advanced laboratory. If we were able to test positive for a plant that had a hop latent viroid and cultivate that in a media, test that media to make sure that it had the presence of hop latent viroid, and then do sporadic or intermittent applications of both of the microorganisms, what we could potentially do is we could test the plant and we could test the soil to see if there was any type of, mechanism of suppression, and then try to gauge what that looks like through the data. Yeah, Google Scholar's really great place if you're looking for information. And you're not always going to find the exact piece of information that you're looking for, especially if you're trying to do cannabis research. But if you find a paper on, let's say, Arabidopsis thaliana, they use that as a model organism because typically the data can be applied to a wide variety of different crops. What was the conversation? Oh, yeah. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, UFO. That's a really good question, though. What about aloe water? Aloe is kind of like my second favorite plant after cannabis, simply because it has so many benefits. I use aloe. I actually have a big ass aloe plant that I keep on my porch, and then I bring it in during the winter, and I use it for cloning. In the past, I have taken big old chunks of aloe, just whole, put them in the blender, and put that in my reservoir and fed. I mean, if you think about what it is, you know, it's a plant. All of that gel is going to contain nutrients, enzymes, amino acids, all these different types of bioactive compounds like saponins and phytohormones and things like auxin and enol-3 acetic acid. So aloe is a fantastic plant. I mean, I use it, you know, as a clone gel. I also, you know, in the past, I haven't a long time, but you can take aloe, fresh aloe, and water it in. Plants love it, man. And it's really not, it's not gonna like you're not really gonna over fertilize, right? If you go and mix a couple of leaves in a blender like that and feed it into your bed, there's not a large chance that you're gonna like get nitrogen toxicity, like if you were to add like too much blood meal or something like that. Yep. Spores are ubiquitous to the environment. In fact, both of these are ubiquitous to the environment, Bacillus subtilis and Trichoderma. But when you're able to take a large population, a large colony forming, a large population that has a large colony forming unit count, it will proliferate and colonize substrates. I love the Trichoderma. I mean, I used to use like the Myco, like the Great White and the Myco Jordan and stuff like that way back in the day. But when I found out and I started reading about how Trichoderma basically does the same thing as endo and ectomycorrhizal fungi, but it also has so many more benefits, it didn't make sense for me to continue using the mycorrhizal because the Trichoderma is, it has more functional benefits. It helps with sunburn. Yeah, aloe is not just great for plants, but the reason why I keep it in my house is because it's a medicinal plant as well. So if my dog, I have a bulldog, and he's allergic to grass. Of all fucking things a dog could be allergic to, he is allergic to grass. So he gets flare-ups at different points of the year where he'll get rashes, and you know, I have allergy medication that I have to get him. But if he gets a little flare up or something and it's not too bad, you know, I can take that aloe vera, put it on his skin, and it will help out. That works on burns, cuts. I actually, I cut my neck open in a quad accident where I was going down this straight and I had the thing in the top of fourth. So I'm hauling down this road, and there's a 90-degree turn. And so I downshift and I downshift and I'm at the bottom of third, right? And I brake to make the turn because I can make it with the brake. But the fucking thing didn't have any brakes, and nobody told me that when I hopped on it. And so I went across a barbed wire fence, just what the top thing on the barbed wire, and the barb stuck in my neck and it slit my neck open. Now, I didn't cut an artery, I just slit my neck. I was really close. It could have been fucking fatal. But, you know, I'm not the kind of person that goes to the hospital unless I'm dying. In this case, I did go, but I didn't take anything that they didn't give me anything. Like I didn't want to get stitches on my neck and shit like that. And so what I ended up doing is we used a natural remedy that contained aloe and a couple other medicinal plants, and I applied it to my neck for a couple of weeks, and it healed up pretty good. Yep, you can feed aloe pretty consistently. Aloe's really, you know, the cool thing is like as a plant, it doesn't contain like a high amount of like NPK. It's not like a fertilizer. It's not going to like burn things, but it does have all of those saponins. Like that gel contains so much bioactive compounds that when you put that into a media, it doesn't matter if it's cocoa or soil, a type of potting mix or native soil, it's going to stimulate the microbiome of that, because the microbes are going to have access to like a huge buffet of organic compounds and things like hormones, amino acids, sap. Like there's just so many different things that are in there. Takes a long time for a plant to make a relationship with myco, much more prevalent in perennials and forests. That's a really good point. Trichoderma reproduces at a much, much higher rate than the mycorrhizal fungus. And also, one of the things to think about is when you're talking about mycorrhizal versus trichoderma. So mycorrhizal the plant will elicit a messaging signal. If it is in conditions where it needs more water or more phosphorus or more nutrients, those are the types of conditions where it'll actually create a synergistic relationship with that microorganism. But if the plant has everything it needs, like let's say you're indoor, you're in a living soil, it pretty much has everything it's need. The plant is less likely to create a relationship with that mycorrhizal fungus. And that mycorrhizal fungus needs to be able to have that relationship to live, right? The difference about trichoderma is trichoderma doesn't have to make a relationship and the plant exchanges carbon for nutrients. It's optional. The trichoderma can live as a saprophytic free living soil microorganism, but when it comes in contact with the roots, it can make those associations. It can make, you can add it and it's going to colonize the root system better than a mycorrhizal fungus because it's better at proliferating and utilizing nutrients and solubilizing that nutrients. The plant wants that. So the plant will keep releasing exudates into the soil. So that's trichoderma and the bacillus and these other beneficial microorganisms are releasing their metabolites, which is what's doing the biochemical work. Yeah. I think if you can have, one of the things too is like if you think about things in the terms of the logistics, you can pretty much come to a logical conclusion. So what I mean is think in terms of energy, think in terms of resource, and then think in terms of the logistics. When it comes to any type of problem, those things are going to be what you need to look at. A good example, what we talked about earlier about the relationships between mycorrhizal fungus and trichoderma. Let's talk about energy. So these microorganisms derive their energy from organic carbon compounds that are in the media, right? So fungus will break down things like lignin and cellulose, and those are like the wood, right? Wood is, lignins, cellulose, they're constructed. And what'll happen is these microorganisms will release these enzymes and it will basically it'll liberate or unzip those carbon bonds. And so while those carbon bonds are being unzipped, they're also liberating little like it's not just, oh, carbon, carbon, carbon. It's like, oh, this piece of carbon has iron attached to it, or this piece of carbon is an amino acid, this piece of carbon is this compound, and it's also in the process liberating nutrient ions. And so they're going to proliferate because that's their energy source, is having access to that carbon. So if you've got really complex carbon, it's going to take longer. It's going to take a more complex organism. It's going to take, these different types of enzymes to break that down. But while they're doing that to get the energy from the carbon. But while they're doing that, they're liberating those nutrients that they're also utilizing. So when we're looking at it from a logistics standpoint or resource standpoint, I mean, what are the resources? What's the substrate for the energy? So what type of carbon compounds are in that media? what type of nutrient ions are being liberated from that media, and then logistically, how can those microorganisms access that? So if you have a microorganism that is just a free living soil microorganism and it can go and access that carbon and that nutrients more efficiently, it's going to have a greater chance of proliferating in that system. Now, when you have limitations on your resources, that's when things start to change. So let's say, given you have a system that has an abundance of resource, plenty of water, good gas and water exchange, and plenty of different types of carbon sources, those organisms will function and play nicely. But what happens when the carbon source, the energy source, starts to dry up? Well, what's going to happen is the strongest of the strong, survival of the fittest, are going to procreate and outcompete the other microbes. Yeah, Jeff Lowenfels got some really great books. And if you ever get a chance to see Jeff speak in person, I highly recommend it. He keeps the audience engaged. He's like a funny old grandpa, like who's just really witty, and he will make you laugh and he will educate you at the same time. Jeff Lowenfels is awesome. I've gone to a couple of his talks. I see him frequently at shows. Really cool dude. So if you guys have any questions, I guess now's the time for Q&A. We were talking at the beginning of this about white ash. Again, I've never really I don't care about whether the ash is white or not because I understand the science behind it. Do you think that the saying that soil has everything we need is true? I'm growing in my yard in different parts and it has different compositions. It's mostly clay. No, it's totally false, dude. Anybody that says the soil already has everything it needs, they're full of shit, dude. If all soils had everything we need, we wouldn't fucking need fertilizers to grow. Though, like, let's take North Dakota, for example. Okay. So North Dakota actually cultivates about 95% of the wheat in the whole entire US. If you have ever been to North Dakota, which I recently did, it's basically grassland desert. There is nothing out there. There's no topography. The wildlife is really sparse because it's just grasslands. There's nowhere for things to hide. I mean, except small rodents and stuff like that. The only thing that grows out there are basically this weedy grass. And the reason why that's the only thing that grows is because the soil is crap. There's about 1.5% organic matter, and then the nutrient levels are so low. Now, you can't just, like, I've heard people say, oh, you just need to add microbes, and like a tablespoon of soil contains all of the nutrients that could feed an acre of corn. All you have to do is add biology. I look at them and say, that's fucking retarded. No, it doesn't. Biology isn't going to magically make things like copper or manganese or zinc appear when the soil's deficient. You have to add those things. Adding biology isn't just going to magically increase the soil carbon content or the organic matter content. It may help adding microbes. It may help solubilize nutrients. It may help with growth, and over time the biomass increase from like the roots that are decaying in that soil, and that can increase biomass, organic carbon content. But you can't create things from nothing, at least on this dimension of reality. You can create things from nothing, but not in the physical reality. Like, you can't just make more nitrogen appear. It's like You can't just make more calcium appear if it's deficient. So I would say that that is a false statement. Soil testing is helpful in every situation. I highly recommend anybody to do soil testing, or at least if you're growing in hydroponic system, at least do leaf tissue testing, so that way you can figure out how to adjust your nutrient regimen. Yeah, I'm on sand. Where I'm at, my property is fucking straight sand. It holds very little. Okay, so I did a soil test the first year I got onto my property, and my total nutrient solution in my soil was 68 ppm. My water has more nutrients than my soil does. It only had 1% organic matter. It was literally just sand. And so it's like in those situations, there's like, what are you going to do? You have to add something. You have to add compost, organic material. You have to add amendments if you're going to build that soil fertility up. You don't have an option. Look at, I think it's like 98% of the world's soils are not suitable the way that they are to do high value agricultural crop production conventionally the way that we farm. 98% of soils. There's only 2% of native soils are good for agricultural cropping, conventional cropping. That's why we use so much fucking fertilizer. That's why the fertilizer industry is the largest industry in the world, is because our soils are so poor. And it's just that's the nature of our soils. We can be stewards of the land and increase soil health and fertility through natural farming practices, but it takes a steward to do that. It takes somebody to work that land. Oh, whoops. Is it true you find mushrooms growing is good biology in soil? Can that soil be dug up and used for indoor? I mean, you could. So agronomic soil versus a modified growing mix or like potting mix, they function entirely different. Modified growing mixes function like hydroponic media because the amount of soluble nutrient ions that are falling into solution is more akin to a hydroponic nutrient than it is to um, the soil solution that you would find in a native soil. The native soil solution, you might only be at 150 ppm and it's still adequate, and your plants are robust and 15 feet tall, and you're trying to figure out, well, why is it different? It's because of the nutrient ions are solubilized different because of the amount of carbon in the different medias. Mushrooms are definitely a good sign of biology, and it's probably a sign that there's a good amount of organic matter in that soil, because those fungi need kind of more complex materials to grow off of. That's why you see fungus more growing on like wood and leaves, because those are a little more complex than things like a meal or or molasses, stuff like that. Yep. Without the access to the aquifers, they wouldn't be able to grow anything in North Dakota. Those scablands are impossible to grow in due to the lack of organic matter. Yeah, it's a grassland desert. It is a grassland desert. Yep. From Oklahoma up to Manitoba, it's mostly sandy soils. So we get two different soil types here in Oklahoma. We either get red dirt, which is the red clay, or we get sand. I would prefer the sand. Personally, I like the sand because it's got good draining capacity, and as long as you add plenty of organic material, you can build up really good soil systems in that. The tropics have some of the poorest soils in nutrition, but look at the growth. It's the ability for those soils to cycle nutrients efficiently. It doesn't. Here's the thing. It's like we don't I've grown crazy big ass plants at really low nutrient ppms. I've also grown really great plants at high nutrient ppms. The difference is that if you are doing small consistent feedings and you're getting and everything is balanced, you can see great results. It's really about that balanced nutrition. Yeah. Cheers. There's a huge misnomer about the Himalayas being nutrient deficient for growing. All of the sediment that runs downstream into India, making India extremely fertile. That is true. That is one of the benefits of living in a basin where a lot of the runoff, glacial runoff, rain runoff, it gets deposited in the lower areas. And that is considered natural weathering. So the apatite material that is becoming the soil is becoming weathered, and in doing so, it's releasing a lot of those nutrient ions so that they become available to the plant. I believe, though, also the sand on my property works really great to filter out to filter the water that's in my aquifer, because my well water is fucking immaculately clean. It is hands down the cleanest fucking water I've ever tested. In fact, I don't think I will ever sell the house that I currently live in just because of that aspect. If I was to ever move, I would probably still keep that house. The water is so fucking clean. I was shocked when I saw it. My water ppm is like 20. It's so fucking clean. We have been adding organic cocoa repurposed for our red clay soil and sand from our local river to help. Yeah, man, that's always a good thing. Look, here's the cool thing about like the native soil. So anything that you do to it is most likely going to have a net positive benefit because it's so deficient in things like soil organic matter, nutrients, biology. It's usually poor soil structure. So anytime you do something compost or a compost tea or microbial inoculant or a top dress amendment or anything, it's going to have a net positive benefit because it's adding something that's not there. Best advice for a rookie grower. I just started in beds for the first time, 2x3 beds, 2 plants, maybe one depending on strain. 45-gallon beds. So, Chadwick, I would say that soil testing. If you're a new grower and you start off with soil testing, by the second year that you've been cultivating, you will be so far ahead of people that have even been doing it for a decade. So, soil testing, learn about the nutrient demands of the plant and when and how much you should supply at what points. And that is probably one of the best things. Also, a huge pro tip, if you're using LEDs, keep your temperatures a lot warmer and a lot more humid. Also, if you're having problems with LEDs, try dimming your light because oftentimes that'll change the whole dynamic. And then spray Epsom salt at 1 tablespoon per gallon twice a week, no matter what type of system you're running. Those are things that I could tell any new grower, and you're going to see a huge difference in quality and vigor. Actually, daikon radish is great, Okie grow. So he says he's got red clay in Oklahoma. He's been using daikon radish to help break up the clay. Any other advice to help on heavy clays? So what you can do is you can actually add in sand if you want. that'll help with structure. Um, Organic matter, but that daikon radish is perfect, especially if you're not harvesting the daikon radish. Because what'll happen is daikon radish can get fucking huge. So if you've got a bunch of that in a plot, it's going to create, basically these tubulars inside of that. And then once those start to decompose, you don't harvest them. You let them decompose. And so now you've got all these different areas of the soil that has been kind of broken open, expanded by that tuber. And then you're leaving all of that organic matter to decompose in that clay. So what's going to happen is you're going to get a bunch of carbon into that soil. And then it's also going to, when it's decomposing, it's going to liberate those nutrient ions. So the next time you go over and plant something, those nutrient ions will be in that soil. Yeah, smoke break. Yeah, if you also have really compact soil, and let's say you like, okay, I want to start farming this land, I want to improve my land, it's okay to disc and till. I know people are like, oh, you can't till, you can't till. First year, till the shit out of it. Get all that soil broken up, get your compost tilled and disked in there, get your amendments disked and tilled in there, and plant some cover crops. It's okay if you need to disc and till the first couple of years while you're building up that organic material. It's okay to do that. Try not to, Chadwick, try not to have any runoff in your beds. You want to fully hydrate without runoff, because when you have runoff, you're leaching nutrient ions. And if, like for me, I balance my soil through soil testing at the beginning of the run. I don't want I don't want any of that nutrient to like leach out. I want it to stay where it's at, because I'm only adding enough for a single run. I was about to ask about humidity with LEDs. Can you explain more on why? Yeah, so the light is more efficient. And so you're getting a higher UMOL, so higher photosynthetic capacity with LEDs. And if you want to get the transpiration rate that you would get under HID, because the light is not emitting as much heat, it's increasing. You're getting greater energy efficiency with the LED, but it's not generating as much heat at the canopy. And so you want to run your environment hotter. And if you run your environment hotter, it'll, you know, it'll increase your VPD. And you don't want to run a really high VPD in veg. And so you need to increase that humidity to match the higher temperatures. And the reason why is because if you want good transpiration rates under LED, you need to have your environment warmer. Under high intensity discharge lights, the infrared is heating up that canopy. And so you're going to have higher transpiration rates under HID. To get the same transpiration rates under LED, you need to increase your environmental temperature. So you have to get that heat from somewhere. If it's not coming from the light directed on the canopy, it needs to come from the environment. Yep. Peace of mind farming, nailed it right on the head. It has to do with the transpiration of the plant, right? So the water movement. So vapor pressure deficit, which is, temperature and your humidity. So top shelf cannabis, who are you asking to test the soil? A commercial grower or just a regular grower at home? And is soil testing like VPD? Not really. Is soil testing like VPD? Is not really a big deal unless you're doing a commercial grow. No, VPD is so important. It doesn't matter if you're a home grower or a commercial grower. Both soil testing and VPD are extremely important. Dude, especially if you're under LED, VPD is so, so important. You want to maintain the right environmental parameters if you're going to maximize efficiency across the board on everything. As far as who should be testing, I mean, if you just want to do the guesswork and you just want to guess, you can guess. It's fine. I did it for the first couple years that I was running organics. But a home grower can test. I built a nutrient calculator. If you use Logan Labs and you get a standard soil and a saturated paste test, you can put those results they email you into the calculator and it'll spit out how much of what you need to add to maintain nutritional sufficiency and balance for your next run. And if you do that and you look at your levels and see how much you need to add and you study that over the course of a year, year and a half, you're going to get just an exponentially better understanding of how nutrient dynamics work and what you need to be adding to maintain that sufficiency and balance. So no, you don't have to do it, but it's one of those things that it's going to change your game. It's going to change the way you cultivate, and more importantly, it's going to change the way you think about cultivation. And that's the whole thing, the perception and the complete holistic understanding of how all these things function. Again, we have to think about energy, resource, and the logistics. Think in terms of those three things, and you'll always come out with a holistic kind of idea of how things function. Brassicas are also nutrient accumulators. What companies offer soil testing? So I recommend Logan Labs. So my nutrient calculator is built off of their data sets. And as an agronomist, I only use one lab. I am going to be switching to Cove Environmental once their state-of-the-art soil testing lab is up and running, because there's a bunch of people that I know. They're here local. I can drop samples off if I need to. If I need to do leaf tissue, right? I could take my leaf tissue, go dry 45 minutes, drop it off at the lab, have it there. So I'll be switching my lab, but the majority of both the commercial cultivators that work in living soils, the majority of the companies that build soils, like Build a Soil, Kiss Organics, myself, we all, use Logan Labs. Again, I'm going to be switching because the lab I'm going to be the lab that I already work with is way more technically advanced than these other labs. Yep, you leave them and not harvest them for the daikon radish. You available to go to Grow Me Talk giveaway we're putting together? I don't know anything about it, so you'd have to fill me in a little bit more on that. What is a high temp acceptable for flower with LED? I keep my temperatures around 82, 84 degrees. That should be the leaf surface temperature. You should be gauging your temperatures based off of leaf surface. I apologize if I failed to mention that. So go get yourself a little laser thermometer. That costs about $15 on Amazon. You can just get a cheap one or whatever. And you can gauge. Don't get a cheap one. Actually, get a decent one. Go spend $50-$60. Get a decent one, and you laser thermometer your canopy, and that's what you should be basing your environmental parameters off. I sorry if I failed to mention that before. Who am I seeing at? Oh, you're gonna see me. I'm there. I'll be at the Sour Kush comp. I actually entered flower and I have a booth. They asked me to be a judge, but I was like, this time I'm gonna enter. Have I ever made bokashi balls? Yeah, I used to make bokashi all the time. I stopped making bokashi personally because it's so labor intensive. Unless I was going to do commercial scale, it didn't make sense logistically, and I didn't want to do that because it's would have cost so much money, and I'd have so much. It logistically didn't make sense. But I have a friend Evan who owns Southern Oregon Bokashi, and he already does large scale, and so we just partnered up. I just distribute his product for him, and he makes great product. I've vetted it, I've used it, and I know the guy's solid. So Could high VPD in flower certain stages cause airy buds? I'm reading up on all that now. No, I don't think so. So high VPD would mean that you're running a little bit drier, and typically when you run drier, the buds are actually a little more dense. However, too much nitrogen can cause that, and also too much light. So if your buds are fox tailing and they're get try turning down your light a little bit. Where can I find that black licorice Durban poison? No idea. I smoked Durban last time I smoked Durban poison. I was in Missouri with my buddy Andrew. He grows it. What is this? I'm going to look in Ontario to see who offers it, but only if it's $100. It would be worth it. What is that? I'm not sure what you're talking about. I'm just going through these chats. What you growing this year? Blueberry Train Mac. All my seedlings are all outside. All just Blueberry Train Mac. I'm doing line work. I'm running through all the F3s. I'm running through a bunch of the crinkle cut varieties. I'm under LEDs and I've never checked VPD. My plants have always looked wonderful. I'm an old school grower and I've never heard of VPD up until about a year ago. Oh wow. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that you can't have great results, but you might be in a situation where your VPD was already pretty good, where your temperatures and humidity were pretty balanced already, so you never really experienced the negative impacts of, let's say, having, too much humidity or not enough. But, it's situational too. Everything's different. I always keep my VPD kind of dialed in. I'm sure what's what called again? I'm not sure if you're talking to me or somebody else. I do not leave that calculator till done with unless it now. Oh no, no, no. So what happens is you just can't on the calculator if you press the back button or you try to refresh, it'll it'll bounce you off. It just because you pay to use it and then like you print, once you print it, it's like there's your thing and then it goes through and it's done and then it'll reset. So if you need to do more testing. But yeah, don't refresh if you're using the calculator. I'm a believer in VPD. I am a believer in soil testing. I believe in the law of minimums in horticulture. These are my rules. And those are all good rules because the laws. Oh, you'd be interesting. You should DM me. Because I know you are pretty well educated, peace of mind. I had some Dutch researchers contact me. I was talking to them about some things, and he turned me on to a couple of research papers about iodine as a plant nutrition. And I still haven't read the whole thing. I scammed through it. I need to actually go through that and read it. But that's what I'm going to be looking at here pretty soon is that iodine. Bro science to me, VPD. Oh, it's not bro science at all, my friend. I mean, you can go look at the actual peer-reviewed research and stuff like that. But like I said, man, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But are you also using HID lights top shelf? Because if you've been growing for 40 years, there's a good chance that you're still using HPS. And what typically happens is what I've seen is people that switch from HPS to LEDs, they have to go through a learning curve because of that infrared heat and because of the VPDs are different. Yep. Chadwick knows, dude. He's using that calculator, dude. We do the THC testing and mold pesticides, etc. But it would be great to see if we could do the soil in the future. Well, you can. Even if you're in Ontario, you can mail your soil sample to Logan Labs. They'll accept samples from all over the world. It's not a problem. I've had people over in Europe and the UK send soil samples for me to look at. What temp do terps start cooking off in flour? I mean, different volatile organic compounds will volatilize off at different temperatures, even low temperatures, because that's what they are. They're volatile. They're very unstable. So as they're produced, they could be released even if it's 60 degrees. But I would say if you keep your temperatures, like I like to kind of drop my light intensity and my temperatures when I'm getting closer to finishing off. But I would say just keep things at around, below 74 when you're drying or whatever, below 75. They'll dry real quick, but you'll also preserve a lot of that because you're doing it in a short time. Is that the same tool I use right now to check for my? It might be. Yeah, it's probably a laser thermometer, but it's probably incorporated into a little tool. So somebody just engineered that thing. So you might be able to use your dab tool. That would be kind of funny if you do get a little video of you testing your canopy temperatures with your dab temp thermometer. What's your ideal VPD range, mid late flower? So it looks like it goes up. The VPD increases over the course of my flowering. So I keep things really hot and humid for the first couple of weeks while the plants are bolting because even though you flip them into flower, they're still kind of in a vegetative state and they're putting a lot of biomass. So I keep everything for probably the first 4 weeks relatively same to the veg. So I have a kind of lower VPD. It's warmer and humid. And then as buds start to form and develop, I start decreasing my VPD. So I might go from like 1.1 and then slowly up to like 1.4, 1.5 over the course of the flowering stage. Let's see. This is a good question. What up, Brandon? Any issues with putting a clone rooted in cocoa in a solo cup outdoor in soil? Good question. So what I would do is I'd grab like a little bit of grab some like veg top dress because the cocoa's inert. And so you're gonna have a space like right at the root ball where there's no nutrients. So they're gonna go and reach the soil. But if you grab like a little bit of top dress nutrients or add a little humate or something like that, just feed a little bit so it can spread out into the soil. But you should be fine. As long as the things are healthy, give them a little bit of a little bit of food. Dutch passion. Yeah, I'm not sure who has Durban poison. I've actually never grown Durban poison myself. I've seen it grown. I like it. It's just never. I've just never really, had it in my garden. I'm definitely familiar with it. Yeah, wake and bake time. It's I got here early. I got here at 7, and I packaged up about 40 packages from yesterday's orders. Put them up there for the mail. Uh, did a couple other things, and now we're just doing a live. Oh yeah, I've done a podcast with Bryant before on Future Cannabis Project. We talk about nutrient dynamics and soil agronomy. I do not have a Canadian supplier. No, we don't ship to Canada because the expense for registration I couldn't afford. It's like $200,000. It can take up to 2 years. It's a lot of bureaucracy, and it's not something I was willing to risk. So no, no. If once we have our factory built in North Dakota, we'll work on the Canadian registration then. Yeah, white papers. White papers on the business. I'm so far behind on the comments, guys. I'm just trying to catch up. Yep, that's a good point right there. Like Texas and Arizona, super dry. Girls are raging. Yeah, no LED. So that's the difference. So if you were to switch to LED, it would be something that you would really want to pay attention to is the VPD. Yes, you can use apple cider to vinegar to pH down. Also, that apple cider vinegar has acetic acid, acetate, which is actually a fulvic acid molecule that will bind with calcium and keep it available. Also, Micro Plus. Micro Plus is 30% off right now. All the sizes. This bottle right here, it's $19.99 currently. If you haven't had an opportunity to try this, it's a combination of lactic acid bacteria, photosynthetic bacteria, and fermentive yeast. It helps outcompete pathogens, cycle nutrients, helps with phosphorus, produces phytohormones, produces a bunch of beneficial compounds for the plants, enzymes, organic acids. Yeah, simplicity is the whole thing too, is everything works synergistically together. So I get asked all the time, hey, can I mix this with this? Or can I mix this with this? So yesterday I mixed up some nitrogen humate, some Kiaha, some Trichoderma, and some Bacillus subtilis, and did my first feed for the outdoor season because I just transplanted my seedlings. And I get it all the time, right? Can I do this? Can I add this and this together? Or can I add this combination? You can add whatever. You can add all of them together if you want. They're compatible with other people's products. You can do them separately. You can do it's fine. Ease of use, don't have the pH. If you go and look on my IG, I did a little video yesterday where I was just mixing up the 4 products. And one of the things that you're not seeing is I'm not measuring anything. I'm just adding stuff. I'm not pHing anything. I'm just fucking putting it in there and fucking adding it. And you can see it's so fucking easy, especially if you're new and you want to use products that are affordable, efficient, and ease of use. That is the big thing. Makes a huge difference. Plus, you don't have to run 18 different fucking bottles. I go with Black Dog LED for the last 11 years. I used to do HPS and HID, of course, but never ever heard of VPD until I said recently. Oh, okay. Well, I'm not sure Black Dog is in business anymore, but 11 years, man. I haven't used LEDs for nearly that long. 11 years ago, I think they were purple. They've come a long ways now, though. So I stopped using high pressure sodium in 2014, and then I switched to ceramic metal halide. But before I was doing the ceramic metal halide, I was doing HPS and metal halide checkerboard. And I never did VPD either. When it wasn't until I started using LEDs that I started like, oh, okay, this makes sense. And I would just make sure I had a good humidity and temperatures when I was, before that. As long as temperature and humidity is all right, what else is there to watch? I would say having air movement, but not having your fans blasting on your plants. That you don't need, you need a light breeze. One of the things that I see a lot of times is people that have all these crazy fans that are just blasting the shit out of their plants. That's actually causing stress. And also what happens is when you have all that wind, the plant stomata is going to want to to close up, and the plant's not going to want to transpire. And the reason is because you're creating really dry conditions, right? So typically what will happen is as the plant is transpiring, that surface right under the leaf has a little bit of, oxygen, and you want the oxygen to be moving, but you don't want it to be, you want the air to be moving, but you don't want it to be so hard that the plant is trying to transpire as fast as possible. I'm stoned. All right. So Ball Bean King asked, what are your thoughts on Dr. Earth and Gaia Green? I'm not going to answer that because I don't know. I don't have an opinion. And also, it kind of irritates me when people come to the Bokashi Earthworks channel and ask me about other people's nutrient lines. What's that wild smell in the humates? That is nitrogen. It's bioactive. It's really strong. And I know what you're talking about. It's really strong, but that's the nitrogen. Oh, yeah, I didn't think of that. It can be used. I wasn't thinking about the insect part. How should I best use my Agsil 16 at the end of flower? Week 6 and there's no reason to use it at week 6. You're too far in. If you're going to run that Agsil 16, it's a potassium amendment first and foremost, although it does have the benefit of that added silica. If you're going to use it as a potassium amendment, you really need to get it in there probably by about the second week of flowering, so that way you have adequate potassium throughout the grow. Could you explain how you dry again? You mentioned it on another podcast, something like keeping the humidity and drying as it is not 60-60. Fuck no, 60-60. You have to think about the way that water moves. If you understand that water moves, jeez, 60-60 fucking again. Okay, first and foremost, when I'm harvesting my plants, I'm probably at maybe 70 to 72 degrees. My relative humidity is usually around 45 to 50 when I finish. Okay. Does not make any sense to me if I'm trying to dry a plant to put it into conditions that have a higher relative humidity than what I just took them out. So if I took a dried ass fucking bud, right? If I took dry ass fucking weed and I took it and I left it on my counter while it was fucking raining outside, just because the relative humidity of the room, it's going to rehydrate. Okay. So, one, that doesn't even fucking make sense to me. Why would you pull something out of a room that has lower humidity and put it into a higher humidity situation? The way that I dry is I dry at about 70 to 72 degrees and about 45% RH. Okay. Full plant hang. I remove all of the fan leaves. After about 7 or 8 days, you should be able to snap those buds perfectly off. They'll just snap right off the stick. The outside of that flower is much drier than the inside of that flower. So what I do is I toad it up. I buck everything up. I toad it up for about 2 days and I rotate that material. What happens, this is due to physics and the way water moves. The water that is trapped, that water that's more difficult to move, that's trapped deeper inside of those buds, will start to move to the really dry side. So the moisture becomes evenly distributed, right? So you have super dry flower on the outside. When you toad it up, it evenly distributes that moisture, and then you end up with a perfectly cured, dried and cured bud, where it's still got that snap, where it snaps, but it's sticky. So 72 and 45, 7 days, 7 to 8 days, 2 days in a tote, straight into a jar. If you're off gassing your jars, that means you put it in there too early. Once you go LED, you never go back, I would say. LED is the business. Something about CO2. What about CO2? The Bacillus subtilis was sold out yesterday, but it's back this morning. Can I still add it to my order? I just ordered yesterday. I mean, there's it's all automated, so there's not really much I can do. I do apologize about that. I didn't even know that the inventory was wrong on the website, so I did update that. Yeah, I do mine faster anyway. I just don't do 60/60. And here's the thing too. Why would you want to, like, I hear people that brag about like, "Oh, I did a slow cure. I cured for 21 days." It's like, "That's great. Your fucking weed was wet for fucking 2 weeks while it hung there." I was like, "That's not fucking cool." Wet, your weed is one, it's wet, and it's oxidizing. So if you want to preserve cannabinoids, you want to preserve terpenes, you don't want them to oxidize. So the faster you can get that process done and jarred up, you're gonna have better quality. But I've heard people brag about, "Oh, I did a slow." It's like, dude, your weed has been fucking wet for, you know, the water activity level of your fucking weed has been at optimal level for pathogens and bacteria to grow for the last 2 weeks. Well, my fucking shit was in a jar 10 days after I fucking harvested it. That's the difference. How often should I use the calcium silica in cocoa? You can use it once every 2 weeks, just about a teaspoon per gallon, or teaspoon per gallon of water. Teaspoon to a tablespoon, just depends on how much you want to give it. Hey, I mean, that's a good one. I mean, I always think cigarettes have white ash. Does that mean they're clean? Fuck no. That shit's full of chemicals. But the way that they process it and how dry it is, it burns that way. You grow with LED. I do. I grow with LEDs. I use Off-Bose, Aries. So I recommend the either Vivo Sun or AC Infinity. They make these little tent humidifiers where you can put them on the outside of your tent with a little tube that goes into the tent. Those are the fucking business. So I have about 100 clones in a 2x2 tent, and I don't. They don't have domes or anything. I didn't ever put domes on them. I took my clones, put them in that tent, and then I have that fucking humidifier keeping my humidity where it needs to be for those. I'm not sure what Celsius that is. It sounds warm, maybe. Yeah. I use Black Dog. I get a gram of watt at least. That's not bad. Are there any soils or potting mixes that don't work well with my nutrients? Yeah, they all work pretty good. I mean, you have to remember all soils are built differently, and so they're going to have different nutritional levels, and that's why our feeding schedules are like suggestions. Like, I want you guys to build your own feeding schedules based off of what works best for you. Or if you're using data, soil testing, I can tell you exactly. I can give you an exact fertigation plan. But they all work really, really efficiently. You might need, if you're using an inert media, you might need to add some top dress. along with the humates, or you might not need to if you're running a really good soil. I have an isopod issue indoors. Do you think Bouveria bassiana will help knock back the population? No, I don't think it will. I think that if you have an isopod issue, you should use Pyganic 5.0 and drench your media. It will kill them. Ooh, this is the good one right here. Emid Otter asks, 1/4 of my outdoor cannabis grow area has been getting septoria. What can I help with this? Okay, check this out, bro. I have ads running right now for the season just about this topic. Trichoderma and Bacillus subtilis. You guys that know me already knew this was coming. So they're vials like this. They're pure spores. There's no carrier. You can mix this with water and spray and drench your plant. I at least once every 6 weeks throughout the season. It'll help with septoria, fusarium, botrytis, pythium, bud mold, powdery mildew, all the different pathogens. That's what you want to grab. You can go to the website. And then also Micro Plus can help too. They're not, it's not, this doesn't outcompete pathogens as well as the Bacillus and Trichoderma combination, but the Micro Plus is on sale, and this is great for your soil as well. It'll build up the beneficial micro populations. How do I get a pound or so of Q micronized? I had a minion leave the bag cracked, a hammer. I'm not sure what you mean. How do I get a pound of Q micronized? Oh, I don't know, man. My Kiaha is liquid. I do cold press Kiaha because it has more bioactive components to it than the dehydrated. So I don't really work with the dehydrated stuff. But it sounds like it turned into a chunk. Alternative for calcium silica with synthetic fertilizers. I can't wait till I can get your products in the EU. Geez, I'm not sure there is. There's no other. There's only one place in the world that will last the night is mine, and it's in New York. And I don't think there is an alternative for the calcium silica. I guess you could do. I mean, you're using synthetic fertilizer. I don't know, man. Probably. I don't know. Calnit, calcium chloride, uh, orthosilic acid. Ortho. This is great. Biscuit and Gravy asks, would love to try some of your humates. What would be best for outdoor versus indoor? Or are both ways just as beneficial? Well, it depends on what you do. So I grow indoor and I grow outdoor. I grow outdoor a lot. I do the outdoor for my projects and stuff like that, my breeding projects, my selections, and then for live rosin. So and anything that I grow outdoors, I turn into live rosin. I really only smoke my indoor, but the humates can be used. I use my humates for both indoor and outdoor with great success. Outdoor, my outdoor gets fucking insane. My plants were between 14 and 16 feet tall last year on accident. Have you run or smoked people under the Thayer's genetics yet? I have not. Flushing with calcium? No, I wouldn't flush. I would just make sure you have an adequate amount of calcium. Silica can help as well. So calcium silica, it's one of the things that I recommend, like tomato bottom end rot is it's a fungal pathogen. So you can use things like Trichoderma and Bacillus subtilis, but the best course of action is to get that added calcium. Yeah, the humates are very strong. And here's the thing: it's the reason why they smell so strong is because it's so concentrated. That's why you don't have to use so much. Yeah, mold can come from 60/60 easy. Fresh only high times magazine poll a few years ago about flushing and 60% preferred unflushed plant to oppose the flush one. Huh, that's weird. I mean, I don't think flushing makes a difference. It's just a myth. It's not a myth, but it's situational. Like if you have access of something that you need to get rid of, then flush. But if you've done everything properly, you shouldn't have to. It's impossible to leach out nutrients from plant matter by running cold water through the root system for 2 weeks. It's just not signed. Well, here's the thing: the plant will utilize anything that's stored in there. A good example of this is like when you're seeing nitrogen deficiency. The reason why you're seeing the yellowing on the bottoms of those leaves is because it's taking that nitrogen from the bottom of the plant and it's translocating it to the top to make up for what it's not getting at the roots. So plants will utilize, stored nutrients. Yeah, go get some. Go get you some. 30% off on the Micro Plus right now, too. Terpene. Yeah, I think I actually have some of that Nog Champa. I think you might have sent me some. Could you tell us about the crinkle cut versus the skunk cut? Yeah, so the crinkle cut is they're both very, very pungent. The crinkle cut is a sweet vanilla blueberry with a train wreck back end. So it's blueberry. It's more akin to the blueberry train wreck than anything that I have. I fucking love it. So it's very, very sweet. It's very, very pungent. The skunk cut to me is what a skunk smells like. It is very pungent and acrid. It's got a lot of like really acrid, earthy tones. Um, like like that musky, piney, sagey kind of like combo. That's the best I can describe it, I guess, without saying that. Well, it smells like skunk to me. That's what it smells like to me. Like when I pass by skunk, I smell. It smells similar to like train wreck to me, but not like citrus. It's not citrus. It's not like lemon. It's not pine. It's like this acrid, pungent, like combination of a lot of those things, but none of those things. It's hard for me to describe it. Ash color and has nothing to do with flushing. Ash color has to do with the moisture content and the particulate size of the material being burned. Oh yeah, Battle of the Breeders. We're not gonna have a Battle of the Breeders this this Friday, upcoming Friday, because I will be flying to New York. But the following Friday, we will resume. It can come from the nutrient level stored in the bud though, because what happens is when you have different carbon compounds, complex carbon compounds will actually burn at a different temperature. So some require higher temperature to volatilize. And if it doesn't reach that temperature, it will just look like that's where you get the black. So it does matter. There's a couple of factors that affect the temperature that it's being burned at, but the main ones are going to be moisture and particulate size. But nutrients can affect the temperature at which it's being burned as well. Does the calcium totally dissolve in soil once it's gone, or is it still there to well, it's not like a water soluble like a salt, so it is micronized, so will disperse very well in water, but it's heavier, so if you're not keeping it mixed, it can drop to the bottom. But once you get it into the soil, because it's micronized, it's going to move and stay in the soil. It'll move throughout the soil system, but it'll stay in there until it's used. So the silica will be converted into monosalicylic acid. The calcium into calcium, divalent calcium ions. Clones are coming. Dude, I actually have the Chem D cross the Black Lime Reserve. They're all rooted and ready to go out, but I'm fucking debating on whether I really want to release it or not. If I was going to release it, I'd probably do kind of a high price on it, probably like $500 a cut, and I'll probably only release like 5 of them, to be honest. That way it keeps it super exclusive, and it's expensive, yes, but it's not $5,000 like I've seen. Hell yeah, go on the site, get you some bokashi. Yep, that's right. Fresh only. Some minerals have higher combustion rate. If there is excess left in the plant, those minerals will burn different temps regardless of moisture content. Exactly. Well said. Yeah, man. I never dealt with septoria until I got out to Oklahoma, because I've grown outdoors many, many years in California. Where I'm at in the Midwest, man, I saw it early on. I was like, oh shit, dude. And so I just know now. You just have to pre-treat. I have to pre-treat, and I have to use it throughout. Possum sill. Oh yeah. That's like the number one way like that I see fucking plants get fucked up is that leaf septoria. Dude, it can get brutal. I mean, it'll start dropping all of the bottom leaves and it'll just work its way up the plant. I've seen it get bad before. Have I ever grown silver haze? Yes, I have. I've grown silver haze quite a few times. I grew the silver haze that was like more kind of cat pissy, kind of like more ammonia smelling. Yeah, bushes are the way to go, but I oftentimes just let mine fucking go. I won't top. Oftentimes I won't top, and I'll just be like, let's see what these fucking things look like, so I can get a full picture of whether or not the plant is apical dominant or if it's auxiliary dominant in its structure. HDE podcast, yeah, man. Just reach out. Just reached out. I'm always down to do podcasts. Nice. Nice. Yeah, so you don't overdo it, man, and you've got good drying cure and everything, and you should be good. But anyway, I'm going to end this live for now, guys. I appreciate you guys joining. Remember, the Micro Plus is 30% off right now. And I'll come back and do these lives. I'll see you guys soon.